It is the midnight hour. We're moving into talk, reassurance. Some of you, the first time you've ever heard about your personal power. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty. This is Unindoctrinate. So happy to be with you. And we've been talking about the assault on Aquarius, demons and angels, Elvis Presley, Paul McCartney, and we've got a lot more to talk about today. We're going to talk about LSD. We're going to talk about MK Ultra, and we're going to talk about Paul McCartney and his use of LSD. And we'll begin to talk about Sir Paul as he is today, make some conjectures. And I don't know, I think we're going to bring some things that are interesting to you and might even be life-changing, because that's what we're here for, cousins, to help you unindoctrinate yourself. And I'm also known on YouTube as the Christian Whistleblower. So I invite you to go over to YouTube, type in Christian Whistleblower. You'll find my channel. And I do hope that you will subscribe and avail yourself of the nearly 2,500, that's right, 2,500 videos. Wow, that's amazing stuff. So LSD and MK Ultra. MK Ultra has used numerous methodologies to try to manipulate people's mental states and alter their brain functions, including and especially LSD. Now, early CIA efforts focused on LSD, and LSD has come to dominate MK Ultra programs. This due according to hss.doe.gov. So it's an official government website. And I know a lot of you, some of you, a number of you are less than against the use of LSD. I would ask you to ponder why this man-made chemical would be so popular in the world of mind control. And if you really want to use it, that's just me. But the CIA basically wanted to know, at least this is their front story, if they could make Russian spies defect against their will, and whether the Russians could do the same to U.S. operatives. So LSD was given to employees, military personnel. I don't think I got any of it when I was in. Government agents and members of the general public, surreptitiously, meaning they didn't know about it. And LSD and other drugs were usually administered, as I just said, without the subject's knowledge or informed consent. And that is, for what it's worth, a violation of the Nuremberg Code that the U.S. agreed to follow after World War II. And what they really wanted to do, and as you think about what's happening today, the CIA was trying to find out if they could wipe a subject's mind and program him or her as a robot agent. And you think about these pitiful individuals that walk into public places and shoot people. You have to wonder if they are MK Ultra, Monarch, Tavistock products. And I think this is one of the things that President Trump is trying to bring out when he emphasizes mental health, mental health, mental health. Because if you can, and I know some of you get all upset about it, we don't want any restrictions on guns, but hey, I have to say that if you've been remanded to a mental facility against your will, if you spent more than X amount of time there as judged by experts to be questionable, then you might be a sleeper MK Ultra agent. You might be a sleeper Tavistock mind control agent. You might not even know it, but you might be a sleeper agent. So I'm sorry. I'm pro-gun. I concealed carry. But I am not in favor of people that have been remanded to a mental facility against their will for an extended time to be able to carry weapons, because you could be, without even knowing it, a sleeper in MK Ultra. I'm just saying, I know some of you won't like that, but it's the truth anyway. The Office of Security used LSD in interrogations, but Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who ran MK Ultra, thought it should be used in covert operations. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, this is amazing stuff. And by 1962, the CIA had developed a series of super hallucinogens, which are thought to hold greater purpose as a mind control weapon. And that's why I know I always get myself in trouble when I tread down this path. But there's so many people within the quote-unquote truth movement, so many people within this quote-unquote enlightened movement that are so happy and so quick to rush into using hallucinogens. But these are natural hallucinogens. They're from the earth. So's arsenic, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just saying. So I don't know if we should be rushing to use hallucinogens, because if the government wants to use them to control your mind, is it possible that there's other entities that want you to use them so they can control your mind? I'm asking the questions. Only you can provide yourself with answers. Now, we do know that Paul McCartney openly admitted that he used LSD. And for me, with all due respect to my Paul is Dead PID researcher friends, it's much less of a leap of logic, much less of a much better and elegant deduction to consider that Paul's sudden, abrupt, and inexplicable personal and professional changes were, they could have been part of LSD. I'll admit that. But the fact, folks, that his complete physical appearance changed, I don't think that can be attributed to LSD. And I know even the Paul is Dead people don't say that it's attributed to LSD. But, the guy, his complete personality changed. And I know you say it's because he died and was replaced by a double. But isn't it possible that his personality could have changed as well because he was using LSD? Isn't it possible? I think it probably was possible. And the people that were working on McCartney, they had the benefit of having already worked on Gladys Presley, already worked on Elvis Presley, maybe even already worked on General Patton before them, but that's another story. But yet, folks, I've got to believe that after my hours of study, after my hours of consultation with insiders, that intense mind control assault, temporal mind control assault was levied on Paul McCartney. And I think that it could have accounted for even the physical changes in Paul McCartney. Now, I know that, even when I first came out with this, people laughed at me. But today we do know many things we didn't know a couple of years ago. And taking into consideration the physical and the emotional, psychological changes in Paul McCartney, taking into account that forensic experts say that his changes in his physical changes are impossible from plastic surgery, you've got to look elsewhere for explanations. And the Paul Dead replaced by double is one explanation. Is it the best explanation? I don't know. If I follow the logic, Gladys Presley was killed. Elvis Presley eventually was killed. They weren't replaced by doubles. Paul, I don't think he was killed. I think he was more along the Elvis line, being drug along. But I just don't think, I think it's a simpler answer than killed and replaced by a double. That just has so many difficulties in it, folks. I know there's impossible changes in the color of the eyes. There's impossible changes in the brows. There's impossible changes in the lips. There's impossible changes in the ears. These things could have happened, in my opinion, through temporal torture, where they warp people across time, across space, across time, and across space. They stretch people literally across dimensions, and It's a funny world that we live in when I think that's more plausible than him being killed in a car crash and replaced by an at least equally talented musician that's been able to fool billions for decades. Not to mention, folks, if he was subject to temporal torture, there's a very small group of people that would have known. Now, if he was replaced by a double, there's a lot of people that would have known. And all of those people being quiet, unless they're all Freemasons, which I don't think they are, I don't know how plausible that is to me. The proof that he has changed physically remains irrefutable. How he changed, of course, is the real question. And I conclude, and I'm open to conversation, I'm open to debate, I'm open to discussion, but I don't think the Paul is dead school is right. I don't think he's dead. I think he's deconstructed. I think he's demolished. And I think he's damn lucky, folks, that he survived. That's all I have to say. And I don't know about Paul McCartney, but if you've been through such debilitating injuries, if you have chronic injuries, if you have sicknesses, if you have illnesses, and you've tried everything, think about Stem Light. Go to jeffreydaugherty.com. Click on the Stem Light logo. Use the word heal, and they will give you 20% off of your stem cell treatment. If you're a doctor, you already know how efficacious stem cells can be. And if you go to southernstem.com, use the word help, they'll do some very, very, very special things for you. Healing for you, healing for your patients. Use the word heal. Stem Light, my great partner here in stem cell therapy, jeffreydaugherty.com, southernstem.com for the doctors, southernstem.com for doctors. Go to jeffreydaugherty.com, click on the Stem Light logo for folks that do want stem cells for themselves. So the question becomes, if Paul hasn't been killed and replaced, did Paul know what happened to him? And that's a really deep question. That's a really powerful question. I don't think that McCartney was aware of what happened to him, at least initially. Now, my research has led me to conclude that the realization of what has been done to him, he did finally get there. I think that there's demonstrable actions, demonstrable markers in his current personality and deeds that tell me that he does know what happened to him. I believe that he eventually came to grips with what he had done, too, under the dark grip of the Dark Lords of M.K. Tavistock. In my estimation, this is just my opinion, if I look at and chronicle and survey the behavior of Paul McCartney post-1969, it seems to me that his conduct is of a man that's realizing that a great injustice had been perpetrated upon him. And I also think his actions are indicative of a man that has realized that he himself was used to perpetrate a great injustice. And I think that he has taken efforts and made efforts to do what he can in some small way, in some attempt to make amends. I can't help but look, and this may be just me, and I'm not a fan, not particularly a big fan, big Elvis fan, not particularly a Beatles fan or a McCartney fan. A lot of respect, of course. I can't help but look at Sir Paul of today and think that he's a man trying his best to do what he can to make things right. And in my mind, this is really the best explanation for the breakup of the Beatles. I think McCartney woke up to what had happened to him, and he just couldn't allow himself any longer to be a part of the beast that the Beatles had become. Paul could no longer stand to be a part of what fall had desecrated. And if you look at his post-Beatles music from Wings right up to today, I think he demonstrates his commitment to returning to the inspiring music of the pre-assault Beatles. I think many Paul is Dead enthusiasts tell a similar tale, but they either let John Lennon or George Harrison be the Beatle with a conscience, unable to perpetuate the lie anymore. Now, I never was a Beatles fan, and I didn't ever listen to their music. But as I started my research into the Paul is Dead phenomenon, I think that I've got an objectivity that a devoted Beatles fan might not have. And my dispassion shows me a Paul McCartney that saw what had been done and what he had done when he was buffeted and controlled by the lords of MK Ultra, Tavistock Monarch. And I think that he, as soon as he found out, he started taking corrective action as much as he could. Whatever his reason was, whatever his motivation is, it's clear historically that Paul immediately terminated association with the low-frequency Beatles, talk about music. He also went back to Verdi tuning in his own music and in his solo work with Wings and beyond. McCartney was, I believe, aware of the spiritual battle that he was fighting. I mean, why else would he put an end to the most successful band in history? Why else would he immediately stop doing the music that they were doing upon the band's demise and immediately return, for the most part, to the music that he was doing before Sgt. Pepper? I look at his embrace of veganism. I look at him allowing PETA to use his image to promote non-cruelty. And I see a man that's trying to do his best, and he's trying to correct past evils. That's just me. And even if I'm wrong and the Paul is Dead folks have it right, the result really is the same. The Dark Lords of MK Tavistock, they were able to derail the mass enlightenment of human population. They were able to stave off the dawning of the age of Aquarius. The king was gone, and Paul was, for all intents and purposes, dead. Now, we have to talk about the few regrettable instances where Paul seems to raise his ugly head. Paul isn't quite dead. And McCartney's had a few of those regrettable public moments. But really think about it. What would you expect to see from a person that was subject to such intense, horrific mind control for as long as he was subjected to it? You'd almost expect to see some occasional expressions of fall. And I think we saw one of those when John Lennon died. I mean, this is a guy that was Paul's friend for many, many years. How did Paul react? Well, I don't think Paul did in that moment of stress. I think Paul did. If you've ever seen the video, it's the 9th of December. McCartney's leaving an Oxford Street recording studio, which is odd enough. John dies and Paul's in the studio recording. And he was asked by reporters for his reaction to John's death. And he kind of flippantly said, I was very shocked. This is terrible news. And some said, why are you in the studio? He says, well, I just didn't want to sit at home. And they asked why. He says, I just didn't feel like it. And then Paul's asked, when did you first hear the news? He goes, in the morning sometime. And they asked him, what did you think? He says, it's a drag, isn't it? And I think it was a reoccurrence of fall, brought on by the great shock, brought on by the great stress, brought on by the great sadness that McCartney was experiencing at the death of John Lennon. If you watch that video, that guy's not in mourning. It's a guy that was kind of bored with the whole thing. It's a guy that couldn't have cared any less. And I'm thinking that man that we saw on the day that John Lennon died wasn't Paul. The shock and stress of Lennon's murder had thrown Paul back into the fall mindset. It was kind of a flashback, if you will. And maybe the controllers used that shock to try to pull him back. Maybe try to do new damage. So I think it was a fall flashback to me. Now, later on, there was a little known event that shows me exactly how the real Paul felt about the friend that he lost, exactly how much that friend may have understood about what Paul went through during those dark days of fall. And if you are familiar with the song Beautiful Boy, I encourage you to go on Google, if you're not, and read the lyrics of that song. And Beautiful Boy is a song that's written and performed by John Lennon. It was released on the 1980 album Double Fantasy. And it's actually the last album that John Lennon released before his death. And Paul McCartney said that this is one of his favorite John Lennon songs. And there was a show called Desert Island Disc. It's a UK show. And he actually said it was his favorite, which to me was really, really weird because of all the great songs that Lennon wrote. I mean, how could this obscure, unheard of, weird song be the favorite song of Paul McCartney, of John Lennon's? I think that Paul gave us a key to some amazing truths regarding the subject of MK Ultra, Tavistock mind control. He gave us an insights about his assault when he selected this song as saying that it was his favorite. And I think he also might have put to rest forever the Paul is dead rumor. Big statements, I know, but I really think that this is a huge thing. We'll get into it right after the break. And, you know, again, it's weird that McCartney loves this song, but McCartney's love for the song apparently is more than lip service. In 82, Paul appeared on Desert Island Disc. He and Roy Plomley, the program's host, are listening to an old recording of McCartney, Harrison, and Lennon singing the old Coaster song Searchin', way back in their Liverpool days. And then the program cuts to McCartney. And McCartney says, this sums it all up. And he plays his favorite Lennon song, Beautiful Boy. And Paul goes out of his way to be sure that he mentions that it's from John's album, Double Fantasy, which, again, was the last album before his death. And when we get back, I'm going to talk through this and reveal to you what I think is some very, very important things. And we are going to see the rise again of Elvis Presley and the tie back to, I think, the seminal event that ties this all together. So when we return after the break, we're going to talk about Beautiful Boy, Paul McCartney, on this television show. What was it called? Desert Island Disc. And I think you're going to hear some things that you never heard before. And I think they're probably going to surprise you. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty on YouTube. I'm the Christian Whistleblower. This is Unindoctrinate. And we are here tonight talking about the assault on Aquarius. And we'll be right back right after this, ladies and gentlemen.